morning. Welcome to another episode of Papa's Workshop. These are for Adam, Brady, Luke, and Brenna. We got to check in with my assistant first. There she is, sound asleep, guarding the workshop. How you doing, Molly girl? Yes, there you are. That's my good girl. Get her belly rubbed. All right, we need to go back to work. You ready? Here we go. All right, so today we're going to talk about finishes, or finishing your project. We could talk for weeks about finishes. There is a lot to cover, so we're going to move pretty quickly. The first thing with your finish needs to start with the planning of your project, because it determines what kind of wood you want. The color you want to end up with will determine what wood, and then what kind of coloring you're going to put on the wood, and then finally the sheen, or how shiny you want it to be or not to be will determine the finish, or what you have to do to the finish. So first, let's talk about coloring the wood. Or I guess probably first thing we do is preparing the wood. You need to have it all at the same. If you've sandpapered, you use sandpaper on it. You want to use the same level sandpaper on the whole project, especially if you're going to stain it. If you're going to change the color, if you've used a lower grit paper, a rougher sandpaper, that'll get darker because the surface is rougher. So if you sand it with finer sandpaper, 220 or even 320, it won't get as dark. And if you have patches that are different, it will look different. The end grain is sort of an exception. The end grain you want to sand to a next level grit higher. You want it smoother so that it doesn't get really dark. You can avoid that. You can, on really soft woods like pine, you can actually put a wash coat of shellac on there and then sand it off, and that'll help even out the color across everything. So it all starts with your project. You've got to prepare the project for your finish. So then if you're going to color it, there are a multitude of choices. You can dye it or you can stain it. And the difference is the dye goes into the wood, the stain is on top of the wood. You can sand off a stain. The dye, you really have to go much farther because it's actually dyes the wood that color. Dyes come in different forms. This is the one I use a lot. You can mix it with water or alcohol. There's a powder form that you mix with just alcohol, and your mix ratio determines on how dark it's going to be. And then you can mix the dyes. You can use 2 different colors of this and put so many drops of each one and get in the middle. So they're pretty useful. They do fade over time. This one's supposed to not fade quite as much, but they do fade over time. But the wood usually darkens over time, so it kind of cancels itself out. Stains don't do that because there's different stains come like this. These are oil-based stains. They sit on the surface, so they tend to hide the grain of the wood where the dyes show you the figure in the wood. The stains sit on top, and there's different levels of this Old Master brand is the ones I like to use. It comes in a penetrating stain, a wiping stain, and a gel stain, and you can get the same color in each one of those, and the difference is how much pigment is in the stain. The penetrating they're basically the same thing. This just has more mineral spirits in it, so it has less pigment. So if it's a soft wood, this will soak in and do just fine. Uh, the wiping stains got a little more pigment, so it's a little thicker. Uh, you can let it set on the wood for longer, and you can get the color you want. The gel stain is really just like the name says. It's really thick. It's like a gel. This works well as a stain, but also works well as a glaze where you put over top of a finish, we'll get to in a minute. So, and these are all oil-based. And with you using oil-based, when you're putting it on with a rag, you need to put those rags in open, let them, you don't want to ball them up. They can spontaneously combust, especially the oils. So once you've decided on your finish, your color for your finish, then you got to put the finish on. Now there's oils that, just like the dyes, penetrate into the wood, and then there's film finishes. It actually leaves a film on top. You get what we see a lot of today is the boiled linseed oil, is an oil finish that you put on, and then you have to let it you let it sit for a little bit, and then you have to wipe off all the excess, because that excess will get gummy. So you let it soak in for 30 minutes, and then you wipe off all the excess, and then you have to let it dry for a few days before you do another coat. It won't ever get shiny, because it soaks into the wood. It's not a very good finish for protecting it from water, anything like that. It's what a lot of the 18th century furniture was done with, because that's what they had, not because it's a great finish. Some people like the color that it impairs, but I found that you get the same kind of thing with shellac or something else. Hard to tell the difference. So I don't use the boiled linseed very much. As a general finish, it's not the greatest thing. So film finishes, you've got varnish, which includes polyurethane, which is mostly what you'll see in the stores today is polyurethane varnish. They'll just call it polyurethane. Like this one's their ultimate polyurethane. You can also get wipe-on, and the only difference between the wipe-on poly and this is the amount of mineral spirits in it. This has got more mineral spirits in it, so that it's thinner. You wipe it on with a rag, and all that mineral spirits has to evaporate before it starts to cure, so it gives you more time. Shellac is the one I like to use. Shellac you can get in cans as well, pre-made. I make my own with these shellac flakes, and these come in different colors. There's a blonde, it's got kind of a yellow color to it, and then it goes all the way up to this garnet, which is really dark. And you mix that in what they call a cut. A lot of the canned ones you get is a 3-pound cut, and what that means is 3 pounds of shellac flakes to 1 gallon of alcohol. 3-pound mix is a little hard to brush, I think, so I tend to go to either a 1 or a 2-pound cut, which is just like it says. It's 1 pound of shellac for 1 gallon of alcohol. So you have to pare down those numbers, a half a gallon to a half a pound, and you just work your way down to whatever amount you're going to make. But you can take the store-bought stuff and add more alcohol to it and make it a lesser pound cut. Shellac is a film finish like the varnishes. It sets on the surface. I like the garnet because it does impair some color with it. You can also mix some dyes with the alcohol and the shellac. We can kind of make it a a different color if you want. Uh, the big difference is shellac is as good a finish as the varnish, except when it comes to the water or alcohol. You put a water glass on it, it'd be okay for shellac. In a kitchen, not so much. But any place where you're going to have alcohol, a drink, or something with alcohol in it, and you set it on it's going to dissolve that finish. It dissolves the shellac. Whereas the varnishes are pretty much impervious to the alcohol. Shellac's pretty much impervious to other, like mineral spirits and stuff like that. That's once it's cured, it's a pretty tough finish. What is really nice about the shellac is it's repairable. Shellac, okay, varnish, every time you put a coat on, it forms layers. And those layers, let me get a board here. So you put one coat of varnish on, or polyurethane, then you put another coat and another coat, and then if you sand that to get it smooth, and you sand down into that other area, I'm exaggerating it, you will get lines where so if you're looking down on it, that's your board, you'll get the outline of the layers in there, and you can't really, you basically have to put another coat of finish on there to cover that, and it still may show. Shellac is different. When you put on a coat of shellac, and then you add another one and another one, it all becomes one layer. It melts into each other, dissolves, and becomes one single layer. So when you sand it, you won't get that layering effect. It'll all be, and that's what makes it easier to repair. Is you could put another coat on it, it just melts with the other layers. You can get the varnishes in spray cans and shellac in a spray can. Like I said, there's just so many varieties. There's oil and varnish, like this boiled linseed oil and a varnish mix that's supposed to give you the best of both worlds. Like I said, those specialty finishes or more specialized finishes for furniture, you don't see in the box stores too much. You'll have to go to something like Woodcraft to get the more mixes. I tend to use the shellac unless it's going to go in like the kitchen where it's going to be, I know it's going to get wet a lot. Then I use the polyurethane, but I kind of just tend to stick with shellac. It's easy you can brush it, you can spray it. It sticks to anything, and anything sticks to it. Actually, most of these finishes, you can mix them as long as they're fully cured. The one thing I hadn't covered is the water-based finishes. You can get a water-based varnish. I think there's probably water-based stains and all that. I've never really played much with those. I know that the water-based finishes, if the humidity is really high, sometimes you can get cloudy finishes from them. But they're always improving those. So I don't tend to use I use the more traditional oil-based stuff. The water-based stuff was initially made to make it safer for the environment and yourself, but they're just as toxic. You need to, if you're spraying it, you need to have a full mask on with the respirator mask. If you're brushing it, if you want to use gloves for any of this stuff, you want to use, rubber gloves. It's not good to be having it contact with your skin a lot of the time. So, but you can put shellac or an oil base over top of a water base as long as it's fully cured, and then that may take a few days, weeks. In case of the oil stuff, it could take a month. I mean, you've got tung oil and stuff like that that take longer than the boiled linseed oil. Those really take a long time if you're going to put something on top of it. So, like I said, it's just a whole deal. You can also, you can put just plain wax on. You could use the boiled linseed oil and then put a paste wax, comes in a can, that you rub on. It's a paste and you rub on. And that brings out finishing the finish. Once you've put on your coats of shellac or polyurethane or varnish, whatever, you want to make it have the right sheen. You've got glossy, semi-gloss, which means it's not quite so glossy, and then satin, which means it's kind of a dull finish, a dull sheen to it. So there's kind of 3 levels, and you can buy the varnishes in those levels. This is a gloss. Well, this one says semi-gloss, but you can buy it in gloss or satin. Same with the wipe-on. Shellac, it's always glossy, but you rub it with steel wool or a synthetic steel wool. This is a little like these here. You get these pads and rub it out, and it just puts a little bit of how much you scratch up the surface. You don't want to use sandpaper. You want to use some really fine steel wool or one of these synthetic steel wools, and that you can achieve the semi-gloss and the satin look with the shellac just by doing that. If you want a really flat, like on a tabletop or something, you want a really flat, then you need to kind of sand the surface with a really fine grit sandpaper, like 600, 800 on a pad. You can also use, there's different materials you can use to rub out that finish and get it absolutely glossy flat. Shellac does really good with that. The varnish, you have to be careful. Like I said, you don't want to sand through a layer. It has to cure. The polyurethane needs to cure for a couple of weeks before you really start to sand out or level it out. It needs to get hard. If you do it too soon, it's still kind of gummy and it'll gum up your works. And the same with shellac, but you don't have to wait quite that long, but a few days anyway. That it get harder both of them get harder as time goes on. So the longer you wait, the easier it's going to be to sand it out. And you just have to be careful not to on the corners, not to go through all the way to the wood, especially if you've got a dye or a stain. You don't want to rub off that color. So once you've got that all done, you can put on a paste wax. I use this dark brown paste wax sometimes to shade in areas that, like in a carving, and give it more of an aged look, like there's dirt had accumulated over the years into those things. You can do that same effect using the glaze, using the gel stain as a glaze. After you've put a few coats of finish on, you put the gel stain on it, and then you wipe it all off, and what remains is in the crevices, and it gives you more of an aged look. So you can do that and then you put some more finish on top of that to seal up that glaze. The wax is on top of everything, and it gives you a different luster as well. You can use just clear paste wax for a tabletop, which I'll usually do over the shellac to give it a little bit more water resistance. The other thing it's good to do, keep a track record of the finishes that you've used on a project. You basically want to make a storyboard. So here's one, and I listed, and we used a dye, a shellac, I used a glaze, and then 3 coats of polyurethane. This was for the kitchen, and so this is what it looks like. This is the first coat with just the dye, and then we had the 1 coat of shellac, and then I put the gel stain as a glaze over top of it. See, it's a little bit darker, but not a whole lot. And then 3 layers of polyurethane. So it's good to keep track of and here's one that's this was of a cabinet that I made. Same kind of a thing. Different different coats of dye, and then so you can also make yourself some little color boards of different stains, and then so I got in each of these colors I got a little can, and so I can mix in between those colors if I want something that doesn't match up with one of these basic colors. And I think that's about it. There's a lot more to finishes than this, but like I said, you kind of need to decide what you want, how you want it to look in the beginning before you start the project. To see, you've got the open grain woods like oak and ash and even walnut that even when you put a coat of varnish on it, you still will see the little cells. You can fill those with a paste wood filler. It's just like, it sounds like it's a paste that you put on, and then you have to sand off. You wipe it off as much as you can after it's set. Then you have to sand all that off, and that filler fills the pores. So you want to get it in the same color as you're going to end up staining it, or with dark or light. And if you want to end up with that glossy look on the top of it, you need to fill the pores. There are other ways with pumice and other ways to fill it, but that's the more traditional way. So you got little nuances like that. There's also 2-part, basically epoxy finishes that you mix 2 parts, and it forms a clear, one really thick coat. Use that a lot on bar tops and things like that. Decoupage. So I think that's about it. I do this kind of off the top of my head, so sorry I keep rattling on. Hope you guys are doing well and enjoying the good weather we're having right now. It was 55 degrees this morning. Had to wear a jacket when Molly and I took our walk. Anyway, you guys hang in there. Love you all. See you later.